Hello, friends, and welcome to Inspire Me. Today, I am going to show you how to create this tower fold card that I showcased on my blog earlier this week. It was inspired by a card by Debbie Henderson, and I wanted to show you how simple it is to create this 3D masterpiece. So I'm going to stay with the same stamp set that I had used on my sample, which is Pretty Pumpkins. This is from the current mini catalog, formerly known as the holiday catalog, and it is fabulous for all things fall. But what I wanted to do for this card is actually change up some of the papers and the colors. So I'm going to incorporate some Cajun Craze as my background. And then for my designer series paper, I'm actually using two patterns from the Tidings of Christmas 12 by 12, sorry, 6 by 6 designer series paper. It is a 6 by 6, not a 12 by 12. So it's this piece here that I'm using, and then this piece here. So it's shades of Evening Evergreen and Sahara Sand. So let's go ahead and get started here. So the first thing you want to do is you want to cut your card base, and it is 5.5 by 8.25. So it's a little bit different than our standard 5.5 by 8.5. So you want to make sure that you're cutting your long edge to 8.25. And then you're going to want to pull out either your Stampin' trimmer or your scoring tool. And we're going to do some scoring first. So I'm going to pull out my trimmer. I'm just going to extend my arm, and we are going to score along the long edge. So what we want to do is put our long edge in, and the first score line is going to be at 1 inch. And if you're using the trimmer, it is the light gray blade that you need to do your scoring. So I've got it measured at 1 inch. I'm just going to run that across a couple of times. I'm going to slide my paper to the 2-inch line, and we are going to score again. And then the 3-inch line. So we're going to keep going across. So now we're going to go to 5.25, 6.25, and 7.25. So you should have score lines across the base. Now we want to rotate that cardstock 90 degrees, and we are actually going to use the cutting blade, and we're going to cut at 1 inch and 2 inch. So I'm going to put this at the 1 inch mark. And what you want to do is there's lines here on the side of your blade. You want to line that up with the first score line, so at the 1 inch mark. And you want to cut down to the 3-inch mark, again lining up that side line with your score line. And then we're going to do the same thing down here on the lower line. So again, just making sure that we're at 1 inch. We're going to put our blade in place and cut across, and then we're going to do that again at the 2-inch mark. I'm going to start at the top, between the score lines, bring my blade down, and we'll go again down here. And then we're going to rotate 180 degrees, and we're going to repeat the same process so that we have those slits on both sides. So there's our one. And then we're going to open that up, move our cardstock to the 2-inch line, and repeat the process all over again. So cutting between the 1 and 3-inch score lines, like so. And you can put your trimmer to the side or your scoring tool, and you should have a base that looks like this. So now we can do some folding. So I am going to valley fold first, and then mountain fold, valley fold, and then repeat the process, valley, mountain, valley. So now we have, I like to call it a spider. It sort of looks like a spider the way it sits. So this is going to be our base. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to push the second score line through and the fourth on both sides. And that gives us our tower edges. I'm actually going to fold these back a little bit. There we go. There we go. So there's our base. Pretty simple so far. That's probably the most complicated part of the whole fold. And now we get to go ahead and decorate. So like I said, I'm using colors that are different than my original sample, but I'm going to keep the same design in terms of the stamp set and layout. And so I'm going to start with the Evening Evergreen pieces of DSP. So you want 4 of these pieces, and they measure 3/4 of an inch by 5 1/4. And then you're going to mount those on a piece of cardstock. I'm using Very Vanilla, and these are 7/8 by 5 3/8. So they're just going to get mounted on top. It's only going to leave about a 1/16 of an inch of a border all the way around. So we're just going to use our seal to do that. And because it's so thin, I'm just using 1 strip all the way down. And then I'm going to attach that right to my cardstock, like so. So we're going to repeat that process. So we have 4 pieces of the Evening Evergreen DSP from the Tidings of Christmas 6x6 paper pack. And we are just going to attach those to our cardstock, which in this case is Very Vanilla, measuring 7/8 by 5 3/8. There's 2, and then we have 2 more pieces. I love that this paper is, what's the word I'm looking for? It's versatile for certain. It's not just meant to be a Christmas paper, or maybe it is just meant to be a Christmas paper, but I love that you can adapt it to other projects. And Cajun Craze, Evening Evergreen, Sahara Sand, they're all very fall or autumn type colors, and we are heading into the autumn season here in Canada. It won't be long before the leaves will start changing and the cooler temperatures are here. I don't know about you, but I absolutely love sweater weather, so I am very much looking forward to that. Now, for our pieces that we've now mounted to our cardstock, I am going to attach these right to our base, again, just using seal. And I'm going to put those on the little panels that are on the edges. And again, it's going to leave only about a 1/16 of an inch border, but you're going to see that pop of Cajun Craze coming through. So if you are viewing this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. The button is down below, and come back often, as I'm always sharing new videos, repeats of my Facebook Lives. If for those of you that aren't maybe on Facebook or don't catch the live, you can catch them here. I do tend to repost them. And then the other 2 pieces that we're attaching are actually just going on the back side, because this card, you will actually decorate both sides of it so that when it's on display, you can see the entire card. So tell me, if you are somewhere where there is fall, is that a season that you're looking forward to? Are you happy to see the cooler temperatures come in? We've been in a heat wave here in Ontario, and I can tell you I'm extra looking forward to the cooler temperatures just because I'm tired of being so hot and sticky. The humidity here is quite bad, actually. Okay, so for our next step, I'm just gathering my pieces. So we have another sheet of the Tidings of Christmas DSP. Again, that's this one here that I'm using. And so these pieces are all 4 inches wide, and we have 2 pieces measuring 3/4 by 4, and then 1 piece measuring 1 1/4 by 4. And again, we're going to mount those to cardstock. So again, I'm using Very Vanilla. So we have 4 1/8 by 1 3/8, and then we have 7/8 by 4 1/8. And we're just going to do the same thing we did with our previous DSP. We're just going to mount those directly to the cardstock using our seal. My voice is a little scratchy, so I'm just going to take a sip of water. Okay. And our last piece of DSP. So you might notice that I'm advancing my seal every once in a while. I find that when it gets close to the end, it starts to stick a little bit to the case, and it doesn't come as clean to be able to restart. And I can actually see that I'm going to run out of seal in just a moment, so I'm going to have to grab a refill. But these pieces are now going to get mounted on your card front. So you need to decide if your card front is this piece or this piece, or if this is going to be the back of your card, and then you'll make this the front. But these pieces are going to go across here, like so. And again, I'm just going to use seal to attach those. I'm just going to grab a new one. Don't think I have. I only have Seal Plus, so we'll have to use Seal Plus, but that's okay. So again, we're just going to use our adhesive. I'm going to give it 2 swipes this time. And we're just going to fit that between the score lines, giving us that nice border of the Cajun Craze popping through. And that's the end of my seal. All right. So with patterned DSP, if the pattern goes one way, you want to make sure that when you are attaching it, that you are attaching them in the same direction. Otherwise, it may look funny and you could be very unhappy with the results. Of course, if you do it intentionally and you like the results, then by all means, go with the flow. It's the joy of paper crafting. There's no right or wrong. It's really how you intend it to be, because the recipient of your card is never going to know that it was meant to be any other way. So there is our base. It's coming along nicely. So you might be wondering what happens next. And so for the next piece, I actually contemplated using a Cajun Craze piece of cardstock as my mat, but now I'm thinking I might pull in the Evening Evergreen. So I'm going to grab that. So So just have to wheel behind me to grab that, and I'm going to cut it to size while we are on camera. So I keep my scraps in our 6x8 cello bags, and then these go in the shelf with each color. That way I don't mix up colors, and if there's two shades that are particularly close together, then there's no mistaking which one is which. So this piece is going to be 2 1/8 by 5 3/8. And our very vanilla is 2 inches by 5 1/4. So that's going to get mounted on there. And then you see we still have that Cajun craze popping out the side. So I'm happy with that change. And I'm going to have to cut a second one because that scrap isn't quite long enough for another one. So 5 3/8 by 2 1/8. And that's going to go on the inside of our card. Okay. Put that to the side for a moment. So I don't want to attach anything yet because we're going to do some stamping on this piece. So now we get to pull out our stamp set. And I am going to pick the So Thankful For You, mainly because it's the only sentiment in the stamp set that's narrow enough to fit on our cardstock. So that is our greeting. I'm going to mount that to our block. And I'm going to grab Cajun Craze ink, which I didn't have out, so I just have to grab that behind me. All right, so we're going to ink that up. And I always like to check my stamp to make sure that I've got full coverage. And then we're going to place that about 1/3 of a way from the top because we're going to put our pumpkins across the bottom. So I'm just going to close that. And now we can attach this piece to our evening evergreen mat. And again, it should only leave about a 1/16 of an inch border. So just line that up. And then I always like to flip my pieces over when I've stamped on them and give it a rub, just so that if it happens to be a little wet still, it's not going to smear. So now this piece can get attached directly to the front. And again, I'm just going to use my Seal Plus here. Because it is the Seal Plus, you don't need very much. Oops. I'm going to flatten the front just to line that up. And then I'm going to give it a flip and rub. So it's coming together nicely, don't you think? I'm loving the colors. Now for our pumpkins, I wanted to do something a little bit different. And so I thought we would emboss them. So I'm going to pull out my Versamark ink. I have an old embossing buddy. We no longer sell these, but if you have dryer sheets, they will work well. They just remove the static from your cardstock, so they don't, so the embossing powder will come off and not stick to it. And I'm just looking for my copper embossing powder, which I don't seem to have. So this is actually an old embossing powder. So if you do not have copper, you can get gold. It is in the annual catalog. Let me just pull it out for you so you can see the available selections. So all our accessories start about page 137. And so there's lots of options. And I think they're probably the other direction. Yes. There we go. So we have copper, gold, and silver embossing powder. Mine is very old, so we do still have that copper available to you. And it coordinates perfectly with the paper that I want to pull in just a moment. So let's do some stamping. So I'm just going to pull in a scrap of Very Vanilla again. And I'm going to run my embossing buddy over the cardstock. And again, this is just so it's not staticky. I am then going to stamp my image in Versamark. So I'm going to use the 3 pumpkins here. Actually, yeah, let's do that. 3 pumpkins. You know what? I changed my mind. We're not going to use the Very Vanilla. We're going to stamp on this brush metallic cardstock. This is in the mini catalog. It's actually brought back. It was in the catalog last year, and it was brought back because it's so fabulous. And what I love is you can emboss right on this as well. So again, we're going to ink up our pumpkins in the Versamark. I'm going to stamp on the metallic paper, and I'm going to sprinkle that with the copper embossing powder. And what I like to do is actually put down a scrap piece of paper that I can use to funnel the excess right back in. So can you see that? It's got like a powder on top. So let's clean this up. So as I mentioned, I like to funnel the excess powder back into the pot, hopefully without dumping it, because it just makes it easier to work with. So you don't have to do this, because now it's sticking to my hands. It's all over my workspace. That's okay. It does clean up very well with a brush. So if you have an old paintbrush or even your water painter brushes, if it's a dry brush, you can just sort of sweep it up. And I won't worry about that after. All right. So now I'm going to pull in our heat tool. Totally off track, sorry. And bear with me because this is going to be a little bit loud while this sets, but I want you to be able to see it on camera. For those of you that have never used heat embossing before, this is one of those wow factors. This is actually what got me hooked on stamping. I was a scrapbooker first, and so this is what changed the game for me. So the Stampin' Up! Heat tool has 2 heat settings. I'm on the hottest heat setting, and I'm just sort of waving it over top of the powder. And soon enough, you're going to see it start to change consistency because the powder starts to melt as it sets. So it's starting to go now. I don't know if the camera is going to pick it up, but it melts the powder into a solid line to give it texture. So there we have beautiful copper pumpkins. Aren't they pretty? I just love them. They're just so gorgeous. All right, so now I'm going to pull in our detailed pumpkins dies, and I'm going to pull in our mini Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine. Now you could use the full size for this, but I did cut my paper so that it would fit specifically in the mini. And so in our dies, we have the outline of those 3 pumpkins. So that's what I'm going to use. and it's going to cut this image out perfectly for us. You can see it fits ever so perfectly right around our image. We're going to layer our plate on top, and I'm just holding it down because the embossing sort of bubbles the paper a little bit, especially with the foil paper. So I just want to make sure that that's in the right spot before I start to run it through. There we go. And give it a crank. And now, when I pull that out, we have beautifully embossed metallic pumpkins. How fabulous are those? And then while I have the Stampin' Cut emboss machine out, I'm actually going to emboss or die cut this detailed pumpkin. So this is from the same set of dies. And I'm going to do the exact same thing here. I'm going to run it through the machine. Now, because this one is a little more detailed and the foil paper is a little bit thicker, I'm actually going to crank it through twice just to make sure that everything cuts. So you can see it came right off the paper. What I'm concerned about are all of these little bits of the pumpkin that are going to come out. So let me get this out of the way. Okay. So there's a couple of ways to do this. You can see that they come out pretty easily just with your fingers. But if you have our Take Your Pick tool, you can purchase the detailed die brush attachment, which looks like this. So it just screws in where the putty would normally go. And it comes with a piece of foam that you use underneath the die, like so. And then you're just going to run the brush over the die cut. And can you see those pieces are just popping out? It's just fabulous. So I like to go both directions just to loosen up anything that is fighting me. You can see that they just literally fall right out. Some of the bigger pieces you might need to play with a little bit because they get caught on the little sprigs, I'll call them. So there's our beautiful pumpkin. All right. So now we're going to attach these to our front. So I'm going to use Stampin' Dimensionals for our pumpkins on the front. And I'm going to use full-size dimensionals here. You could use minis if that's what you had handy, but because of the size of the pumpkins and how much real estate they take up, I'm going to use the full size. And one more at the top here. So then we're just going to pull up our backs. And we'll place our pumpkins on our front. So there is our beautiful front. But of course, we don't want the inside of the card to be missing or not as exciting because it is a 3D card. You're going to see all sides of it. So again, we have that very vanilla. We're going to mount it to our evening evergreen. There's my seal. Now, if you wanted to stamp on this piece, you could, and maybe I will, just to show you what that would look like. So this is going to go in the center, just like our other, and our pumpkin can either go right on the piece of Very Vanilla, or you could mount it to the tower pop out here, which is what I've done on this card. And actually what I did here is I turned my pumpkin over and traced the edge on a piece of basic black cardstock so that it fit perfectly, just to give it a solid background. But for this one, I think I'm actually going to put it right here in the vanilla, and then I'm going to stamp a leaf beside it. So let's pull out the leaf. Let's see what size we want. I'm going to go with this one. And I'm going to stamp that in Cajun Praise again. So I'm just going to grab another block. And where do I want that? We're going to go right about here. All right, so let's attach this to the inside. Hopefully you're loving this card. The tower fold is just so easy to create, and there's so many ways to decorate it and really make it your own. This is just one example. Oh yes, I like how that turned out. So now, because this is such a detailed die, I'm going to actually pull in my Tombow multi-purpose glue. If you have the adhesive back sheets, you could have applied that to the pumpkin before you ran it through the die cutting machine, and it would have transferred the adhesive right to the back. So all you had to do was peel off the label and stick it down, but I did not have that foresight. So we're going to use the Tombow. And I have to say, this actually works very well. I'm not putting a huge amount on, just a light hand along some of these solid areas. And then we put our pumpkin down. And there we have our second tower fold card that sits perfectly for display on your mantle with two different variations for the inside. I hope you enjoyed today's card. I will post the dimensions in the comments. If you have any questions, any concerns, feel free to send me a message. I will also put my email address in the comments for you. I appreciate you stopping by today. Thanks so much and have a great day, everyone.